Hello everyone, now for part 2 of our departure procedures. We're sitting here on the runway over at Bradley International Airport in a Cessna 172. Now I know this is a little scandalous of me because this aircraft is one of the deluxe edition aircraft. I apologize for this, you don't have this. I just wanted an aircraft that was going to be a little fast. I didn't want something that was going to take a lifetime because we are covering over 40 nautical miles here. So again, I wanted to do things relatively quickly here. The other thing I really needed was an aircraft that had both of these. Again, if I were using a glass cockpit, this would just be pretty simple. You just select the departure procedure and go. But in this case, I really wanted to walk you through the process. So if you took a look earlier at our little display here as far as what we need to travel on, go flip it up real quick. We're going to be taking off from runway 24. We need to proceed at 238. Then we need to proceed direct to Hartford VOR. From Hartford VOR, we need to go to Thumb, Yoder, Calverton, all the way down to Sherrill. Now that's going to be a bit of a process. So what I need to do first is go ahead and get to Hartford. Then I need to be able to use Hartford to actually find both Thumb and Yoder. So let's go ahead and dial those frequencies. Now, if you're using this aircraft, which is a little bit different, if anything with these GPS 500 units or whatever you like to call them, it's going to be a little different to enter frequencies. So what I actually have to do is come down here, press this button in to switch to VOR mode, and then dial in the VOR I need, and then press the swap button. As soon as I do that, you'll notice this needle went a little nutty here because of the fact we are now properly set up here. So I believe it's going to end up being, I didn't work the math out too far here. It's going to be roughly like this, I believe. We're basically going to go straight south to get to Hartford VOR. So from Hartford VOR, we need to find Thumb. To do Thumb, if you remember from our little example here, I'll flip it back up again real quick. We are just going to be triangulating from Hartford VOR and the Hampton VOR, which is at 113.6. So let's go ahead and flip back here. Go to our other GPS unit. Switch to this mode. We're going to do 113.60. I'm going to go ahead and swap that. So now that's set to go. Now, if I recall correctly, we need to find the 190. Flip this over to 190 real quickly. Looks pretty good. All right, beautiful. All right, that's going to work very, very well for us. And we've got this one set. So let's think this through. We're going to follow this all the way until we get to Hartford. Once we get to Hartford, we're going to adjust this to 143. Once we've done that, we're going to keep traveling until this needle centers. The moment this needle centers, we're going to take a right turn and follow this while we set up our next VOR. Our next VOR frequency, I'm going to go flip it back on real quickly, is going to be Calverton VOR at 117.2. So let's go ahead and pop back over to our game here. Let's go ahead and set this one up, 117.2. Lovely. So that's going to go ahead and get us. So once we cross Yoder, which will be centering, we'll set that up once we get there, by the way. Then it's simply going to be a matter of following this. When we cross Calverton VOR, we're just going to proceed direct until we get to Sherrill along the 213. Whoa, that sounds a lot more complicated than it actually is. Trust me, we got this. Let's go ahead and take a look at our AP unit down here. Now this is a little different. This one's a little more intuitive in my opinion because it's just a little simpler. Our altitude is going to have to be 4,000 feet. And of course we have our navigation modes and everything else all ready to go. Normally you'd press the arm button to go ahead and tell it you intend to get to 4,000 feet, but that's perfectly fine. Other than that, we are good to go. Last thing I want to check, of course, in the real world you wouldn't just be sitting here on the end of the runway having fun, but hey, it's a simulator, you can do what you want, right? Is I'm just going to double check the text of the actual departure procedure so we know that everything is working the way we expect it to do. Again, I'm going to flip back over real quickly. Let's see here. After taking off on runway 24, we're supposed to climb 238. Let's go ahead and center that up to 238 for us. Other way. Looks like we're pretty much already on the correct heading. This would be the equivalent of maintain runway heading. All right, flip that up here to about there. Perfect. And then we're going to go ahead and get for radar vectors. Again, we're just going to fly direct. And then from over Hartford VOR, yep, all the details, everything is ready to go. It's just a matter of us going ahead and taking off here. Okay, so the aircraft is set. My heading bugs are set. My 2 CDIs are set the way I want them to be. Everything's ready. Let's double check my fuel. Go double check my lights. Make sure everything's the way I want it to be. RPM looks pretty good. Obviously, it's a little cloudy today. Nothing too new there. Like I said, there's a hurricane and all sorts of weather kind of a thing. I'm feeling pretty comfortable, and let's do it. Parking brake disengaged. Full power. Now, if you want to do this flight in the Cessna 152, it's also really not a bad idea, because then you're not going to have the temptation to use that GPS. In my case, if you actually take a look, I've disabled the GPSs by going to a random page that's going to do nothing for us as far as allowing us to navigate to where we need to go. 55, rotate, and up we go. So let's go ahead and follow our instructions. Okay, so we're supposed to climb on 238, and as soon as, of course, we get to a couple hundred feet, 900 feet in this particular case, we're going to go ahead and swing left and proceed direct to the Hartford VOR. Ah, feels nice in a 172. Now, the regular 172 that comes with the default version of Flight Simulator, of course, is set up so that you have, the G1000, which is awesome, but that is definitely something I would reserve for a different video. Gotta bring the nose up just a teeny tiny bit here. Again, we're not to that magical altitude. I'm going to bring us to the left just a tiny bit. Believe it or not, at this airport, you have noise abatement procedures, which we should probably be following, but we're quiet, right? All right, cruising on up here. Oh, I'm going to come to my right just a teeny tiny bit. Again, they said you want to be climbing at 238. Lovely. All right, 900 feet, and then we're going to proceed direct Hartford. Looks good. All right, let's do it. Ooh, much too tight of a turn for an instrument flight. Okay, looking pretty good, looking pretty good. Stand by for instrument mode. Instrument mode engaged. Doot, 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 doot. Awesome. Notice, by the way, we just detected Hampton VOR. Okay, so we need to be proceeding south, so we want to be heading about 150. Should do a pretty good job for us. Looks pretty good. Remember, our top altitude today is 4,000 feet, unless otherwise directed by air traffic control. By the way, for those of you trying this at home with the same aircraft, highly recommend you make sure you're on VLOC mode and not GPS mode, because it's not the same thing. Basically, if you have it on GPS mode, this instrument is using the GPS data. If you have it in VLOC mode, you're using the VOR data, which is coming from, this case, 11490. Let's go ahead and see where our VOR station actually is. That looks pretty good. Let's go swing to the south a little bit.
Red 64 IFR flight plan is canceled. Radar service terminated. Squawk 1200.
All right, looking pretty good.
Frequency change approved.
Lovely. Delightful. We're getting a little slow, but actually pretty good speed. And now we proceed direct to Hartford VOR. And that's really all there is to it as far as that first step goes. Now, normally in the real world, they would have called you and said, proceed direct Hartford VOR, climb and maintain 4,000 feet, or something along those lines. But in this particular case, I'm not worried about it too much. All right, swing south just a teeny tiny bit. Looking pretty good so far. All right, pretty good. Watch my altitude. I'll go lean my mixture a teeny tiny bit here. Keep that engine running well. All right, looks pretty good, looks pretty good. We are slightly to the left of where we need to be. Even though our desired course is supposed to be basically, I think it's going to be 175. Even though we're heading at 180, we're just ever so slightly off course. I'm going to use just my feet to kind of keep us straight. This needle is your best friend when you're doing instrument flying, because it tells you whether or not you're actually turning in that particular direction, regardless of how you're tilted. Obviously, in bad turbulence, it becomes very, very challenging to do it no matter how you do it. I actually am not even touching the controls, as you can see. Ah, foggy days. Nothing new there. Climbing pretty smoothly here. Looking pretty good. You can, of course, see our actual flight plan here if you wanted to take a look at it. I set this up in the thing a little bit earlier. Yeah, this aircraft wants to pull to the left. Nothing unusual. All right, 3,000 feet. Very nice. Look at that. Oh, man. The worst part is I've actually flown and stuff like this in the real world, and I got to say, it's pretty scary. Now, if you were doing this in a jet, this would be a much, much quicker flight. But it would also mean that you have to know exactly what you're doing a little bit more aggressively. I'm taking a look, and I'm noticing that I've centered my little noodle here, and I'm in pretty good shape. Swing back to the left. All right. Again, I'm actually using my feet for this because it's just a little bit simpler when you need to do those little teeny tiny adjustments. Getting a little bit of turbulence, but nothing new there. Actually got to come over here, flip on the automatic pilot. Switch on nav mode. Now the aircraft is actually going to automatically synchronize itself to that position. Come on, you can do it. Ooh, this autopilot is a little touchy. Notice we do not get a flight director on this particular aircraft. Whoa. It's kind of like being on a boat. And that is why I recommend hand flying these procedures. Notice we're climbing at about 500 feet per minute, heading up to 4,000 feet. And the visibility is still pea soup. I can't even see directly below me. Crazy. All right, just about hitting 4,000 feet. And time to go ahead and set up cruise power. Now, a Cessna 172, since it's a fixed pitch propeller, you have to actually play quite a bit with the cruise power to get it just the way you want it. I find 2,400 RPM works pretty well. Again, as you get a little higher, that RPM is going to get a little higher too. Play with the mixture just as you need a tiny bit. And now we are on course. So let's go ahead and take a look back at our actual approach plate here, so we know exactly what we're doing, so we can mentally prepare for what we need to do next. All right, now that we're all set here, everything seems to be cruising. We're heading towards our destination pretty effectively. I love it. Whoop. Careful. All right, let's take a look. So right now you can see that we've just taken off. We went here a little bit, and now we're proceeding directly towards Hartford VOR. Once we get to Hartford VOR, we're going to level off. Actually, we're already going to level off. We're at 4,000 feet. Now we're going to proceed at 1-4 tree until we cross the line for Hampton. The moment we do that, we're going to have to bring ourselves to the right at 190, flip our main VOR frequency to Calverton, and then find this 237. Let's go ahead and pop back. I'll go actually take a look at the map itself so you can see exactly what that looks like. Looks pretty good, looks pretty good. Let me go ahead and grab the in-game map. Maybe it'll make it a little bit more clear what we're doing here. Beautiful. So you can see we actually took off from Bradley. We took our turn here. We hit this point right here, and you can see our aircraft is actually bringing us directly towards where the Hartford VOR is. Once we get to that Hartford VOR, like I said, we're simply going to follow that new radial, which is going to be the 1-4 tree. It's going to be a little bit flatter than this, taking us to Thumb. Then we're going to follow the next VOR, which, like I said, is going to be Hampton, until we get to Yoder. Once we get to Yoder, we're then going to follow Calverton to get us all the way over here. Of course, once we get on this particular radial, we'll probably call the video short, because, like I said, it's going to end up being a little long, because we're not the world's fastest aircraft here. Again, I wanted to pick an airplane where you had to use the traditional VORs. I didn't want to do the 152, because we'd be here for a very long time. All right, let's go ahead and close that out because we're no cheating. Now, some of you are like, well, can you show us some of that GPS stuff while we're waiting, while we get to the next VOR? I said, well, why not? We'll take a look. So now this particular GPS is a little different than some of the other GPSs you probably used, because instead of having like everything in one place, it has some things in one place. You know, this is a GPS 500 in case you're curious. That's what I like to call it. It's just a Garmin. It's a GNS 530. This is a really slick unit. There's actually an upgraded version of this, which is a touchscreen. It's awesome. So let's go ahead and take a look here. So now if we wanted to, we could actually do something silly like this. We could come in here and then we could put our cursor on. We could actually say direct, HFD, for example, if we wanted to see just how far away we are from that particular destination. Let's go set that real quick. Of course, this is our current active waypoint anyway, so I'm not too worried about it. Beautiful. Boop. And you can actually see that it tells us exactly we're 3 minutes and 26 seconds away. Now, since this is a VOR flight and not a GPS flight, I just thought it would be worth kind of seeing the difference real quick. I'm actually going to clear everything up real quick. It's a bummer that we can't do map up, or I should say track up as opposed to map north up. But yeah, maybe that'll come in a later feature. Go ahead and close that one away. I'm actually really surprised that I'm not getting anything down here. I really expected this to show what the radial and all these kind of features are. I'm not 100% sure why it's not approaching there. That's fine though. Channel spacing, we'll flip over to this mode. There's actually a nav mode. It doesn't have it on this version, but that's okay. I'm just going to leave that open for now. Okay. Aircraft is cruising quite nicely. Obviously, if you're doing this by hand, this gets a little bit more exciting because you're basically going to be battling the aircraft the entire time. Power's up just a bit high. Play with my mixture just a tiny bit. That should be more than enough. By the way, when you're adjusting the mixture, the easiest way to do it was with the EGT, but that's again something we can play with another day. All right, in about 3 minutes, we're going to be over it, and then we're going to have to start doing some quick, fancy twiddling. So remember, when we get to that next VOR, this needle will start to center, and then we're actually going to be following this one. But again, this is going to come a little later, because once we get to Hartford, we have to do that initial turn, then get ready to follow this turn. In that particular case, I'm probably going to use the heading hold mode in order to get this thing nice and centered. Again, you can fly all this by hand, but I just thought it would be a little bit quicker and easier. So let's see here. From thumb VOR, I should say thumb intersection, we're supposed to be traveling 190. Which is going to be a little bit different from where we're going to be going. Lovely. Now, the interesting thing is in the real world, when you get really close to the station, this needle is going to get tremendously sensitive, which is going to tell you you're right about to get to it. So in this particular case, you're going to start seeing one of these. One thing I notice is down at this little GPS, the 430, it actually tells me exactly how long it's going to take me, as well as what bearing I'm on and everything like that. This will go away as soon as we cross it, because like I was saying, the GPS will no longer provide us with that tracking information. Now, another thing you're probably wondering is, in the real world, do we usually fly departure procedures with slow-moving propeller aircraft? And the answer is you can, but a lot of times when you're working with airports that have departure procedures, I'd be questioning why an aircraft this small would even be operating there in the first place. There are actually some airports, I think LaGuardia is one, I think JFK is one, that has a special departure procedure dedicated to propeller aircraft. Because we are so slow, we can actually back everybody up basically on top of us or above us, because they won't be able to get by us very easily because we're so darn slow. All right, time to start thinking. I'm taking a look down here, and I notice I've got about 50 seconds. Again, in the real world, you'd have usually a DME display that you could use to kind of help you out with this particular step. I don't have a DME in here, which is, like I said, it's kind of unfortunate because it would make this much simpler. But at the same time, work with what you got, right? So anyway, when we hit that point, remember, we have to take that right turn to 14 tree. If I actually open this up again real quickly, we're almost here. Once we hit the spot, we have to twist that needle to 14 tree and then start keeping an eye out for this CDI. So let me go ahead and flop back here real quickly. Again, when you're doing this in an airliner, this is a lot quicker of a process, but at the same token as, things happen quickly. Beautiful. So now let's go ahead and get ready to cross. Wait for it. You're going to know we're about to cross because this needle will go, woo, there it goes. Let's go ahead and flip this to 14 tree. 143. Lovely. So now the aircraft is going to start getting a little confused. All right, we're crossing directly over it. I'll show you what it looks like on the map just so you're familiar with it. All right, let's go ahead and give the aircraft a little nudge here. Probably so close we've confused it. Switch to heading hold mode. And we'll bring ourselves right around, I don't know, about 130 should be enough. Now notice this little arrow right here has flipped the opposite direction, telling us we're now driving away from the VOR station as opposed to towards it. So in essence, we're following 14 tree away from the station. Again, I'm just using heading hold briefly so that we can go ahead and line ourselves up. Nothing to see out front, folks. I'm sorry. We must be near a city, though, because my frame rate's coming down. In the real world, you always lose frames whenever you get near cities. Not really. Again, if you're looking for a visual, you can see that we're trying to find this line. This is the 14 tree radial. And we're trying to find this point over here, which is thumb. We're going to know we hit thumb when this needle centers. The moment that needle centers, we're actually going to have to change our heading to 190 to follow it until we can find the 237 radial coming off of Calverton. There we go. Bingo. Switch back to navigation mode. The aircraft's about to go crazy. Let's go ahead and get that prepared. Yes, there's nothing in the world stopping you from actually going in here, and instead of using Calverton as the next VOR, using the Hampton as our next VOR. That would actually be significantly more accurate to do, but for me, that's one extra step not worth it because the distance is just so short. Now, if we had an extremely strong crosswind, on the other hand, that would be a very, very different experience. Okay, so now what are we looking for? We're looking to see when this needle centers, which tells us that it's now time to start going towards Yoder. If I pop up our little display again real quickly, again, we've just traveling on this radial now. We're going to know we hit thumb when this line, which is the equivalent of the bottom CDI, centers. Then we're going to take a 190, set up Calverton VOR, and we're probably going to call it when we get about right there. Let's go ahead and put that away for now. Let's go ahead and take a look at our GPS for those of you guys who are interested. You can see, again, I'm not using the GPS. This is just a reference. This is the equivalent of using ForeFlight on your phone. I'm going to go ahead and put that away, no cheating. And you're going to notice that this needle is starting to center, which means we're getting extremely close to thumb intersection. Again, where the 143 radial and the 190 radial hit each other is where that intersection is located. Again, we're not cheating to do that. And I know some of you are looking over here going, well, what about this GPS? Okay, fine. I'll make it go away. You don't need to do it as long as you planned everything and you make sure you twist. Another thing, somebody mentioned this in the comments, and they're absolutely correct. In the real world, you would never just dial in a frequency, set your radial, and go. And the reality is, as soon as you dialed your frequency, you would actually call it up and listen to the audio of that channel to double check to make sure you're on the correct frequency. For those of you looking to do that, by the way, you have all of your navigation options up at the top of the screen. For example, if I click on the nav 1, it would actually start playing the Morse code from that station, assuming there's a valid Morse code from that particular station. You could then listen to it, and then you'd know exactly if you have the correct particular station just by listening to it. Some of these stations, by the way, will actually provide you things like weather, as well as, altimeter settings, everything you'd probably need under the sun, kind of a deal. All right, it looks like I'm getting very, very close to thumb. As soon as I get to thumb, hypothetically, what I should be doing is flipping this one to the Hampton VOR, which is 113.6, and then following it on the 190 radial. But like I said, I'm doing it slightly different. I'm actually going to use the heading hold mode to do it and use this as my reference rather than go through the process of doing it because it's such a short time between thumb and Yoder. Sounds kind of like Yoda. Baby Yoder? I guess if it's lowercase Yoder, it would be baby Yoder. I don't know. Who knows? All right, we're almost there. Again, in the real world, you'd be on the phone. I should say, what's a phone, right? You wouldn't do that on a plane. You wouldn't use your cell phone on a plane. You'd be on the radio pretty much the whole time, and it would not be unusual for them to basically direct you somewhere completely different. One of the scariest things they'll tell you is proceed direct. And then they'll basically say, proceed direct Calverton. It's like, you have to know what you're doing quickly and easily to do it. Stand by to cross our next waypoint. Wait for it. Wait for it. Ta-da! Now, as we cross it, these two needles will both be equally centered as we hit this point. So now what I'm going to do is actually going to flip on heading hold mode. So what's going to happen is this aircraft is now going to turn, and I'm going to use this instrument as our reference for where we need to be. In this case, we need to approach 190, and we're actually slightly off to the left here. So I'm actually going to tell it to come ever so slightly to the right to help approach it. Now we are going to get rid of this VOR station for Hartford. We're actually going to flip it to Calverton VOR. Boink, there it goes. So if I flip this open real quickly, we are now proceeding from here to Yoder via the 190. I'm actually slightly off course, but I'll clean that up. To find this point, we need to triangulate between Calverton VOR and the Hampton VOR. In this case, I'm looking for the 237 radial. So let's go ahead and pop it back over here real quickly. Dial this to 237. Perfect. So now what I'm doing is I'm using my heading hold to center this needle. When this needle is perfectly centered and this needle is perfectly centered, it will mean we're on that final leg of our approach. Again, like I said, I'll call the video pretty much at that point once we get this stabilized. But after that point, we'd simply follow radial off of it to get over to Cheryl. I'm actually going to come to my right a little bit because I'm just slightly off course, and I don't like that very much. I'm going to double check my mixture. Mixture looks pretty good. Whoop, we must be approaching a city again. Now again, I'm using my heading hold to center this manually. I'm not using the automatic pilot to center this using nav mode. If I wanted to do that, I'd have to have set the radio up here. But in this case, it's just easier for me to use that one as a reference. I'm actually going to come to my right just a tiny bit more. All right, Hampton's a pretty good distance away from us, so this needle is not going to be very steady. By the way, one thing I want to say too about in the real world is these needles are never that accurate. It's just not a thing. They're always going, whoa, whoa. Not too bad, but again, 4 degrees is considered pretty good. Yeah, you can see it starting to swing towards the center. Very, very nice. Oh, that looks so good. Oh man, we've nailed this today. Again, when you're learning to do IFR flying, I highly recommend doing it in a slower aircraft. Doing it with one of those G1000s is also great, but you're not going to understand what you're doing as much because the GPS is going to be doing a lot of the work for you. All right, that's looking pretty darn centered. I'm actually going to swing us back the other way. Pretty confident that we're pretty much there. And now all we're doing is waiting for this needle to center. I'm going to visually check that it's on tree 27. Obviously, we're approaching it, so that needle makes sense. If we're actually to take a look at our map real quick, man, we're pretty, look at, there's a little bit of inaccuracy here, but again, VOR is only so accurate. So you can see we're almost laser guided at Yoder right now. Yeah, we're slightly off to the side still. We must be getting a bit of a crosswind. But again, that's the nice thing about a VOR. I really should dedicate an entire video showing you to what I'm doing. But basically, another way to think about it is if this is the heading I should be on, this is the course I should be on, if I point in this direction, I move the needle this way. If I point in this direction, I move the needle this way. That's all there really is to it. So in this particular case, if I want to go this way, I need to aim a little bit towards this. Obviously, the closer this needle is to the center, the less angle I'm going to need to get to it. So in this case, I can see that I'm off about half a degree. Give myself just a teeny tiny bit more to the right to try to center that. Again, you can fly these by hand. You can also have the automatic pilot couple it automatically. That sounds redundant, but it does do a really, really good job of that as well. Oh boy, typical weather. This is what the winter looks like, by the way, in this part of the world. It's like, oh, look at that. It's outside again today. All right, it's looking pretty good. Again, I'm not cheating using the magical GPS or anything like that, because I don't need to. Another weird advantage, by the way, of using VOR is that it's less accurate. Yeah, that's a good thing, because you're less likely to run into somebody. All right, it's looking pretty centered. I'm actually gonna come I'm get rid of that. Just a teeny tiny bit. Again, I'm using the heading hold mode to manually center this. If I was flying it by hand, I'd be doing the same kind of thing, only by hand. So let's go ahead and take a look at where we are. So if I had to guesstimate, we are right about here. So we're gonna be heading this, and we're gonna know we're gonna be heading this because like I said, we're gonna suddenly see that needle shoot, and then we simply grab the Calverton VOR and ride it on over. Looking pretty good so far. I'm always amazed how much fuel this aircraft uses. Looks good, looks good, looks good. Oh, uh-oh. Is that what? Whoa, we must be flying near a city. Yep, see how the needle's starting to move? Now, if we actually popped up our map, check it out. We're getting very, very, very close to where we need to be. Again, we're not using the GPS for this. If we wanted to use the GPS, I'd be flying the Cessna CJ4, but that's for a different video. Getting close, and as soon as this centers, go check one more time. 237, 237, good. I'm just going to flip the navigation autopilot back on. Of course, you could fly it by hand. In this case, if we wanted to get to this line sooner, we could put our heading right at 210, and that would get us there, like I said, sooner. But if you actually look, we're basically facing this way, which is why that needle is centering so quickly. By the way, for those of you who like to wheel the mouse, be very cautious you don't wheel the mouse over this, because you're going to do one of these things and you're going to throw off your entire plan. Okay, there we go. All right, we're just about to cross Yoder. It's pronounced Yode. It's like, oh, my bad. I've always called it Yoder, but that's just me. Everything looks good. Everything looks good. Stand by. Almost there. I think actually one of the achievements is called Stay on Target, and I think that's for doing an ILS approach. I just thought that was kind of a nice touch. Again, look at how darn close we are. We're slightly off, but again, we're triangulating 2 VORs, and it's only as accurate literally as that needle is. Speaking of accurate, I've actually noticed that we're starting to slip the other direction. So I'm going to come to my left just a tiny bit. Now, one of the neat tricks is if you have 2 ADFs, you can actually use those to triangulate places as well. That's a really slick trick, and I call that DC-3 flying right there. Almost there. Take a look. Actually, while I'm waiting these next 30 seconds. So it really should be set so it's a little bit easier to do. Oh yeah, that's an exercise in trickiness. No, we're too far away. Bummer. Alright, stand by. So flip up my view again one more time. So we are literally where my mouse is. In just a moment, we're going to go ahead and take this right-hand turn as soon as we see that CDI needle center, and then it's just a matter of driving us over to Calverton. Very nice, almost there. Again, we'll take a look real quick. Looks like we're ever so slightly off to the west, but that's okay, because it's only as accurate as these needles can be. If you were on GPS, of course, instead of being this little inaccurate, you'd be on the waypoint perfectly. And this is considered acceptably accurate. All right, it looks like we're right about to cross it. Oh, actually, you can see the magenta line. Yeah, so we're just slightly off to the west, which is actually pretty good. Again, this line here isn't actually represented. All right, let's switch to nav mode. The aircraft is going to go ahead and pull us over here. Excellent, excellent work. Okay, so now it would be simply a matter of flying over to that particular waypoint. Again, stand by for ship mode. Whee! Please don't make corrections that aggressive when you're doing your own instrument flying. So now we are basically done with Hampton VOR, but we're not. If we were to actually fly all the way out to Sherrill, we'd actually have to triangulate using this tool again. In that case, if we were going to fly out to Sherrill, we just go ahead and set this to 236. Just like that. And then we'd center this one to, I believe it's 213. And then once they're two lined up, we would actually have found that waypoint that only exists hypothetically on a map. All right, hopefully this video has been helpful. It's been a little on the longer side. I just want to show you how to fly a departure procedure manually. I'm actually going to go show you our map real quick. We literally took off here, flew to here, found this, and now it's just a matter of finding that one and taking us all the way down to our destination. Now, when you do this with the GPS, because most of you probably are, you can always dial in all these waypoints completely manually. In this case, let's go ahead and zoom in a little bit. You can, that's a bummer. You can actually see that we would have flown those all like that. And when you do use GPS, double check to make sure that you're in the correct mode for this. We'll probably do this video again in a faster airplane using one of the glass cockpits, just as a way that you can kind of see this whole procedure, but a lot quicker. As usual, if you have any questions, pop them in the comments. I've been a little inundated recently, so I've been very slow to respond. I apologize, but hopefully we'll go ahead and see more stuff like this if we get a good response. If not, I'll probably concentrate on just doing full videos. Again, one thing that we did forget, and I keep forgetting it myself, is air traffic control is ultimately what's going to dictate what you can and cannot do here. So even though we're flying this wonderful little flight plan on our own, we might not have been able to do so because we could have just been redirected just about anywhere. Other than that, enjoy.